Okay, brief introduction. I am Ben. I work here at bStrong and I've been nutrition coaching for a long time. And so I'll start going over some questions here and I combined some topics too that were overlapping. So, first question to go over, how much protein should we eat? And this is, I think, one of the most important concepts to understand when it comes to training and health and nutrition, all that is trying to get yourself into a healthy range of protein intake. And over the years, that's changed a lot. A lot of the ideas around nutrition have changed a lot over the years. But one thing that's starting to become more apparent is getting an adequate amount of protein is going to be really important for a lot of different things. It pretty much it doesn't matter what your goal is. If your goal is fat loss, it's going to be really important to get a lot of protein. If your goal is building muscle, it's important to get a lot of protein. If your goal is just kind of weight maintenance and longevity and feeling good, you're still going to want to get an adequate amount of protein. And that amount is a lot different than what you would see on food labels. So food labels will say, percentage of your daily allowance and everything like that for the different nutrients. With protein, they put you in the range of like 40 to 60 grams, somewhere in there for an average, like based on a 2,000 calorie diet, which is much, much lower than what most people should be having, especially when we're talking with the active crowd. If you're doing workouts, you're doing any kind of exercise, but even people who are fairly sedentary need to get an adequate amount of protein too. So the range that we typically recommend, and this isn't just us, this is starting to become kind of generally recommended among most nutrition coaches out there, but zero point 0.6 to 1 gram of protein per pound of desired body weight. And so I'll go over like what that desired part means. So if let's say somebody is 300 pounds and they're trying to get down to 200 pounds, you want to base that number, the 0.6 to 1 gram per pound, off of that 200 pounds. So off the lower number, the desired body weight, because if you do it the other way, you could be potentially looking at up to like 300 grams of protein. And that's really high. And not that it's necessarily dangerous for somebody like that to go that high, but that's probably going to be really challenging to get to and not really necessary to get that many grams of protein. So if you're someone that's more like you have 5, 10, 15, 20 pounds to lose, you could potentially just say zero point 0.6 to 1 gram per pound of body weight. If it's much more than that you have to lose, then go more up of that desired body weight. So let's just say, for example, somebody's 150 pounds and they're around their desired body weight, maybe give or take 10 pounds or 15 pounds, then their range would be probably somewhere between about 100 and 150 grams of protein per day. And so for a lot of people, that's really high. It's in all the people I've worked with over the years, it's very rare. And I don't even know if I've had anybody that came in and was in a really good range of protein at first. There's been a lot of people that come in and say they eat a lot of protein and they do well with that. And they say, oh, I know I should eat a lot of protein. And then I do. And then we actually track it for a little while and you realize it's a bit below that range. And so that's something that a lot of people need to work on. And I would say can be one of the first things that you start working on that can be the most powerful and have the most impact on everything. And this range, it's hard to argue much with this. I mean, some people might say like, hey, a little bit lower, maybe a 0.5 grams per pound is good. It's can be enough for some people if it's good quality protein too. But you're just kind of you're playing with fire a little bit when you're getting too low on there and then pushing yourself physically with a lot of activities. I do think, if you're well below and maybe you're around like zero point 0.3 grams per pound of body weight, let's say you weigh 150 pounds and you're more like at 50 to 60 grams, which is not uncommon for a lot of people, then shoot for a little higher, maybe shoot for like 80 grams, just go up a bit from where you are until that feels pretty comfortable, pretty normal, and then start trying to work your way up. But trying to go from 50 grams a day to 100 grams in a day, first of all, mentally feels almost impossible. And then physically, that's a lot on your body. And then you have to change everything around with the way that you eat in order to do that. So think about smaller steps to get up there. So that's our general recommendation for protein. And that's not super negotiable. Like I think that's a fairly firm rule. People that would be in the lower end, I mean, if you're really struggling to get there, just shoot for the lower end of the range and just work your way up to there. People at the higher end of the range, if you're really active, if you're doing a lot of different activities, strength training, and maybe on top of that, a lot of endurance training too, and there's a lot of muscle breakdown, I mean, getting up towards a gram per pound of body weight is fine and can be really helpful and maybe even necessary. So that's kind of the range, and there can be some variety within that range. But I think for most people, if you try to work your way up to that, you'll see better results than most other changes that you would make to your nutrition. So that's a good starting point. More about protein. So protein shakes. There's questions about, what types of protein shakes are good, artificial sweeteners and things like that. There are a ton of different options out there for protein shakes, as you've probably seen. My general recommendation is try different ones, see what tastes okay to you, because if you hate the taste of something, you're not going to have it regardless of whether it's good for you or not. Um, See how your body feels and your stomach and everything. So some people are fine with dairy. If that's the case, whey protein is kind of the most common one and a very high quality source of protein. There's a lot of vegan and vegetarian options too if you don't do as well with dairy, so you can try those out. Like pea protein is a one of the non-dairy based protein sources out there, but there's a lot of different things. There's rice protein and things like that. There's a lot of them are blends where if it's more of the plant-based proteins, they'll blend a bunch together to get all the amino acids. So try different ones, test out kind of taste and texture, and also just pay attention to how you feel over the next few hours after you have it. If it makes your stomach kind of upset, then that's not going to be a good option for you. You're not going to want to have that all the time. Typically looking for fewer ingredients is going to be helpful. There's some with a lot of different stuff in there. Trying to keep it fairly simple, like you want the protein source, some type of sweetener probably in there, and not too many other things. Artificial sweeteners, that nowadays is a very big debate. It used to be kind of everybody, well, for a long time, artificial sweeteners were like the coolest thing ever. And then people started hating them, saying they were basically going to kill you. And then now there's kind of this swing back where it's like there's not a lot of research that shows a ton of negative to it. But my personal approach is I still think it's probably best to limit those. Not necessarily trying to have it, like if you're trying to find a protein powder that you like, probably, and it's something you're going to be having like on a daily basis, probably trying to avoid artificial sweeteners. So things like aspartame and I don't know the exact pronunciation, but like ace sulfate potassium is another one that's kind of in that realm. But looking for sweeteners that are actually like maybe just a little bit of sugar, like regular plain sugar, even like if it's a few grams, is probably a better option than getting artificial sweeteners. Now, if it's like 20 grams of sugar, then you can decide if that's better than the artificial sweetener. Stevia is another good option. That's pretty popular in a lot of them these days. And so far, stevia seems to be okay. You never know. In like 10 years, there's going to be more studies about different stuff, and you find out that something's not good for you. But so far, stevia seems pretty good. It's a somewhat natural source of sweetness. So again, I would try different kinds, but trying to avoid those artificial sweeteners, sticking a little bit more to the natural ones. And if you're having protein shakes every day, it's one of those things that everybody comes from a different place of their means and everything. But if you're having it every day, like I'd push it to try to maybe get a little better quality, a little higher quality one than just looking for the absolute cheapest option out there. That's my take on that. But again, everybody's coming from a different place. So it's even better to get the cheaper kind just to get that protein intake up if you need to, than it is to get too particular about the type that you're having. Pre and post workout nutrition. Pre-workout. So the biggest things for that are, is it a morning workout? If you're doing like an early morning workout, then you've kind of got this whole discussion about, do you want to fast going into that? Like, do you want to eat anything or nothing at all? So when we have people first come in, it's pretty common for people, if they don't eat breakfast, to get pretty lightheaded and dizzy in their first workout or their second workout, because their body's just not used to it. But then you have some of our members who have been coming for years and years at 5:30 a.m. or 6 a.m. and they have never eaten anything before and they're totally fine, but that's because their bodies have gotten used to it. So if you're ever going to the point of you're used to eating before your workouts, and then all of a sudden you start not eating before your workouts, or you go from evening workouts to now all of a sudden you're doing morning, and so you're not going to eat beforehand, you need to take it a little lighter on those first couple of workouts and give your body a chance to adjust to that. As far as like whether it's better or worse, I think that's a personal preference. You could argue that it could be helpful to have some calories before that workout, just to help like performance go up a little bit, but it's probably not going to be a big enough difference to change how you should approach it if you really have a preference to fast beforehand. I do think if you're not eating before your workout in the morning, it does become pretty important to eat something pretty soon afterwards, because you're in a fasted state coming out of sleep. then you're working out, so you're breaking down muscle and everything, and your body is just, it really needs stuff to help that recovery process start. And so if you're waiting a couple more hours after your workout, then you can kind of get yourself into trouble where there's a lot of muscle breakdown and you're delaying that recovery process. So early morning workout without eating beforehand, make sure your post-workout meal is good and fairly quick. Let's say within 30 to 45 minutes, maybe within an hour of your workout. That would be really helpful. If you're going, I guess one other thing or a couple other things if you're doing the morning workouts, be hydrated. So that might mean having an electrolyte supplement, at least some water for sure when you first wake up, and then during your workout, like try to get a good amount of water in, like at least 1 to 2 cups by the time you're getting into your workout. Having an electrolyte supplement with that or a drink or something that gives it a flavor makes it can make it a little easier. Because when you wake up, you're in a bit of a dehydrated state too. So that is a time of day when an electrolyte supplement could be helpful. It could even be just a little bit of sea salt in your water, not enough to make it taste salty, but just a little bit in there can give you some electrolytes that can help you feel better for that workout. And then this, as far as supplements, and we'll go more into supplements later, but there's a supplement, essential amino acids. There's also BCAAs, branch chain amino acids, but more of the research nowadays is showing that the essential amino acids are probably going to be better for you. This could be a time that those could come in handy. What that's going to do is it's going to put some amino acids into your blood, and that means that you're just going to, it's going to help prevent some of that muscle breakdown of that can happen when you're working out in a fasted state. And it kind of helps start that recovery process a little bit sooner than waiting till after your workouts to eat. So usually it's like a powder that you can mix in with water, and it's just, there's not a couple calories to it, but it's essentially can still keep you in a fasted state, but provides you with some of those amino acids to help with the recovery process. So that's a situation when I think those can be helpful. Um, and then if you're not working out in the morning, if it's any other time of day, just kind of normal eating throughout the day. Think about that window, maybe 1 to 2 hours beforehand. You want to have like a balanced meal or snack. So maybe 1 to 2 hours before, you want something that's going to have some carbohydrates, a little bit of fat, some protein, just so you're not going into your workout really starving or like feeling like you're crashing, but also not going into your workout feeling like you're really full or bloated or anything like that. So that can change a lot on depending on the individual. Some people can eat like a pretty big meal like 30 minutes before their workout and like feel pretty good. Other people, it needs to be like several hours beforehand, or they're going to get stomach cramps or something like that. So I would test that out. I do think if you're going more than 2 to 3 to 4 hours without eating anything before your workout, you could benefit from having some type of snack, even if that's like a protein bar or something along those lines. Half a protein shake, stuff like that can be helpful. A piece of fruit. Those are types of things that can be helpful to just help balance out your energy a little bit going into the workout, so you're not feeling really, really hungry while you are working out. You'll want to avoid things in those couple hours beforehand too, like really heavy, greasy foods or anything that bothers your stomach. If you don't do great with dairy, then probably don't have dairy in the hours before, or your stomach's not going to feel very good during that workout. And now switching over to post-workout. The old school thought was like, oh, you got to like rush to a protein shake instantly after your workout, otherwise you're going to lose all the gains that you made during the workout. That's not the case. As I mentioned before, when you are fasting beforehand, that window does shrink a little bit. I would say within the hour is good. If you have eaten in the hours before, then I'd say within 2 hours, 2.5 hours is probably fine to wait till your next meal. One strategy that some people use is they'll have a protein shake maybe right afterwards, and then that kind of carries them to the next meal that might be like 2 hours later. So if you know that it's going to be an hour and a half, 2 hours or more later that you get your next meal in, then maybe a shake or a bar or something like that can be helpful to, again, start that recovery process a little bit sooner after the workout. And it doesn't need to be a shake afterwards. A balanced meal is fine, something with at least a little bit of protein. I would say shoot for at least 25 to 35 grams of protein. 25, that maybe depends a little bit on body size. Smaller individuals maybe closer to that like 25-gram range. Larger individuals maybe more like 35 grams. That's going to be really helpful in the post-workout meal. Some carbs, if it was more of like a high intensity workout or a big endurance workout, then more carbs are going to be necessary and helpful in that situation. If it's just kind of an average strength workout, some carbs are fine, but you don't need to go overboard on the carbohydrates after that. A little bit of healthy fat is going to be helpful too. A topic that gets a lot of questions, intermittent fasting, and um, that was pretty popular over the last 10 years. That gained a lot of popularity. I think it's starting to cool down a little bit. Um, what that is, if you're not aware of that, is there's not a strict definition of it. Time restricted eating is another way that you'll hear people explain that or describe it. It's basically not eating for periods of time. Typically, they say if you're in a fasted state, once you go more than about 12 hours without eating, you kind of into this fasted state. Some people argue it's different than that, but so if you're thinking about you sleep for 8 hours or so, and then you go a couple hours, maybe it's a couple hours before sleep that you stop eating. So maybe 2 hours before sleep, you stop eating, you go 8 hours of sleeping, and then maybe you go 3 or 4 hours without eating breakfast or something like that, or before your first meal. Then you're going into that like fasted, you're kind of in a fasting state at that point. You're at 13, 14 hours potentially without eating. Um, so that's intermittent fasting. Some people, the most common one people do is a 16-hour not eating, so 16-hour fast, and then 8 hours eating. So for example, maybe you eat your first meal of the day at noon, you're done eating by 8 p.m., and then you don't eat again until noon the next day. That's a really common one, but there's a lot of different options in there. Some people do alternating day fasting, stuff like that. Um, is it good? Is it bad? I think the biggest benefit of fasting is it's just a way to restrict your calories a little bit. When most people are trying to lose weight or lose fat, they need to get into a caloric deficit. And so fasting helps you do that, and it kind of puts boundaries there. Some people have a hard time of getting in a deficit by just trying to adjust their eating a little bit, make these little changes here. Oh, I'll try to eat less of this or more of this. That can be a little more confusing than just saying, I have between this hour and this hour to eat, and then I don't have to worry about it. I'm not eating outside of that window. So there are some benefits for that, just kind of as far as what your personality is like, what your mindset is like. Um, it can be helpful. There's a lot of people will claim that there's all these other magical benefits to it. I don't think there's not a ton of research to show that there's a whole lot of magical stuff other than it helps with caloric restriction. I do think it can help sometimes dealing with cravings. If you're somebody that always has cravings and maybe you always need to eat every like 2 or 3 hours, or you get your blood sugar gets a little funny and you start getting kind of hangry, then I think there can be some benefits to fasting. And it doesn't mean that you need to do it every single day or do that 16-8 every day. But I do think there can be some benefits to maybe pushing out your breakfast or your first meal of the day by a few hours and just getting a little more comfortable with hunger. And obviously that can be extreme, like you're starving yourself. But just knowing some people I think are so used to eating, like as soon as they wake up, they're eating, and then every couple hours they're eating the entire day until pretty much the time they go to bed. And they just their body doesn't know how to respond, both mentally and physiologically, know how to respond to just being a little bit hungry. Like it's okay. We're in a place now where like we have constant access to food like all the time. And if you're working from home, it's even worse because it's like you have no restrictions. You have all the food that you want in your house, you can get to within 30 seconds. And so we never have to go through these periods of time where we just maybe have to go a little bit longer without eating. Like our bodies are built, they're pretty resilient. We can go some time without eating, but some people are so comfortable that they have this switch that flips and they just like have to eat, or they start to panic or get a little jittery. And so sometimes I think there can be a benefit to in a controlled environment, like if you're sitting at home, like, okay, I'm just gonna like set a timer and I'm gonna wait like 1 more hour, 30 more minutes to eat. Even though I'm a little bit hungry now, I'm just gonna wait a little bit longer. Okay, if I'm desperate, I can go grab something. We're not talking about like letting your blood sugar crash where you're gonna need to go to the hospital or something. We're just talking about pushing things out a little bit. So I think there can be some benefits to that kind of psychological benefits. Um, but yeah, so that's kind of my approach to that. If it's something you want to try, um, you don't necessarily want to go like 16-8 right away. I think the best way to start out is like just push your first meal of the day out like 1 hour later than you're used to, and just see how that feels. On a similar note, but it's not necessarily fasting, there do seem to be some benefits, and there's some research behind it that we probably should have a window overnight that we're going at least 12 hours or so without eating. And that seems okay, that seems kind of reasonable, but it's actually amazing how many people like will eat, all the way up until bed, like right up until bed. And then within 15 or 20 minutes, you're eating in the morning. And so actually that window is more like 6 or 8 or 9 hours, depending on how much sleep you're getting. And some of the research shows that like your digestive system just needs a break. And when you're only going 6 or 7 or 8 hours, and that's the longest you ever have to go, the digestion takes a while, that process takes a while. And so by the time that it's done with it, like you're already putting more food in, it never gets a chance to just like calm down. I know this isn't a very scientific way to talk about it, but it just needs a rest. It just needs some time when it's not processing food. And if you're eating right up to bed and as soon as you wake up, you don't really get that time. So I think this isn't even really considered fasting, but I think, 10 to 12 hour gap on a daily basis, and whatever, if there's some days when that doesn't happen, that's fine. But trying in general to have 10 to 12 hours between your last meal and your first meal the next day, I think there can be some benefits to that. And again, it helps you get a little bit used to just not having to eat all the time. Um, so that's another thought on fasting. Um, Good or bad, again, I think it can be really helpful for some people to get into a caloric deficit by just giving yourself some boundaries. Just don't get too extreme with it. Some people get so extreme they get down to that point where it's like they have one meal a day. And yeah, there's some people out there that will argue that that can be helpful, but for the majority of people, that is probably not a very realistic approach and probably not very sustainable long term. So, start with just shrinking your window a little bit and see how you feel with that. Um, All right, what is a healthy snack? So I think some of the criteria for that would be something that satisfies your hunger and your cravings, um, that fills you up to your next meal and kind of bridges the gap between meals, oftentimes like an afternoon time frame, because you have maybe lunch at noon and then you have dinner at 6 or 7 or 8. And so a snack in the afternoon can be helpful. So something that can bridge the gap and not necessarily make you hungry an hour later. And so the composition of that is important. So making sure that there's some protein and some fat and not just carbs, because most snack foods are typically just like carbohydrates. So you think like a candy bar or even like a granola bar, it's a healthier version of a candy bar. It's essentially the same thing. It's usually tons of carbs and sugar, maybe a few grams of fat and a few grams of protein, but not enough to make a big difference there. So try to prioritize some protein and some fat in there. So things like trail mix, you've got some nuts in there that'll have a little bit of protein and definitely some fat. Maybe half of a sandwich, if you've got some lunch meat or something like that on there, that's going to have some protein in there. A piece of fruit like apple and a peanut butter or almond butter, that's going to have a combination of some carbs and fat and protein. Fruit and nuts, fruit and cheese, jerky and some fruit. Those are all ways to make sure you are getting some carbs, or sorry, some protein and some fat with the carbs. So think about the composition of it. Start looking at the labels of the things that you're having and think, all right, is this just a purely carbohydrate snack? That's not going to be a very effective snack, and it's not going to necessarily do what we want it to do of kind of bridge the gap to the next meal. All right, we can go over supplements here. So this can be a long topic. I don't get a break without people asking questions here. So supplements. They're not necessary. They're called supplements for a reason. In a perfect world, it'd be awesome to never have to rely on supplements. I think in the real world, there's definitely some supplements that can be helpful. I think checking with your healthcare provider is always very important, especially if you're on medications, if you have any particular health issues. Some of these that might be pretty fine for most people might not be good for you if there's certain things that you're taking or certain things that you're seeing a doctor for. So it's always helpful to run things by them beforehand. And they can sometimes even do blood work and things like that that can let you know if these are even necessary. But I'll go over the ones that I'm going to mention today are all considered generally safe. Again, for healthy individuals, so and in normal quantities, so that all those little warnings we have to give, like okay, anything can be unsafe if you have too much of it. But these are generally considered safe and I think can be really helpful. Vitamin D, in the northern hemisphere and especially in the Pacific Northwest, there are several months of the year that we don't get any vitamin D. Even if you're outside in the sun, you won't get any vitamin D from that. And so that causes a lot of issues. I think the seasonal affective disorder and stuff like that can be a result of low vitamin D. And so that's one that can be pretty easily tested by your doctor. You can ask them to do it. There's even, I think, at-home tests you can buy as well. But it could be helpful to see how low you are to decide how much you want to take. I think taking like a lower to moderate amount is generally considered safe if you're not quite sure where you're at. But I think that can be really helpful. It's important with the immune system. It's important with a lot of different things in the body. So I think vitamin D can be something that people can look into. Fish oil, there's a lot of benefits to that. So it's basically the omega-3 fatty acids that we're looking for there. It can help with inflammation. It can help with brain health and things like that. That is another one that acts on a lot of different parts of the body. It can help with mental health and things like that too. So that's something that can be looked into. If you're eating a lot of fish during the week, then it may not be totally necessary, but a lot of people don't eat that much fish and probably aren't having lots of foods that have omega-3s in them. I mean, there's different types of seeds, chia seeds and hemp seeds and things like that are good sources. There's a lot of other things out there, but it's usually not enough. It's not going to be as much as you're going to get in like a fish oil supplement. Protein, I mean, we spent all that time talking about protein at the beginning. I do think protein powder can be very helpful. Again, in a perfect world, if you could get all your protein through real food, then do that for sure. But that's, to get into that range can be a challenge. And sometimes you might need to rely on protein powder a little bit more early on, just to like get you into that range and see if you're noticing all the changes and you're feeling better and it's good. And then over time, maybe trying to backfill some of the shakes with actual real sources of protein, real food sources. But I think that can be really helpful. And maybe there's days when you can get most of it through real food, and that's awesome. And then there's days where it's like, my schedule's just busy. There's a lot going on. And so then you rely on a protein shake and you grab one of those or a protein bar or something like that. So again, we talked about what to look for in the shakes, test them out, try some different ones. Multivitamins can be helpful. There's some debate. Some people say they're really helpful. Some people say they don't do a whole lot at all. They're typically pretty inexpensive. They can just help fill some of the gaps. Most people are going to be deficient in some nutrients. And so just a general multivitamin can be helpful. Not really a lot of risk to it, but can be some benefits potentially. Magnesium is another one that most people are, a lot of people are deficient in magnesium. That plays a role. Again, it's another one that acts on a lot of different systems of the body, but it can be helpful for sleep and muscle recovery and just it's included in like the electrolytes and everything too. And so sometimes if you're getting a lot of muscle cramps and things like that, or muscle twitches and stuff, magnesium can be one of those nutrients that can be helpful for that. It can help keep you regular against sleep. It can help. Some people find it helpful to take before sleep too. Creatine, that is one that's getting a little more popular nowadays, I think, for the general public. It's been around for a very long time. Behind caffeine, it's considered the most researched supplement that's out there. So don't think that and it kind of got a bad rep. It got tied into like steroids and stuff decades ago, and it's not even close to what steroids would be. And they're starting to find some potential brain health benefits to it as well. And think I think there's going to be more of a push for it in the future. And I think even like for older individuals to take it for brain health and cognitive health and stuff like that. So you can look up to see exactly what it does, but it basically, you take it helps your muscles hold on to a little more water. It helps your body generate a little more ATP when you're doing, what basically just means you're getting a little more energy when you're doing more like strength and short-term exercises. It's not necessarily going to have a big impact on endurance activities, but it can be helpful for strength training, really helpful for strength training, sprint work, interval work, stuff like that. There are essentially no side effects. You'll see some people reporting maybe stomach issues. That's oftentimes they're taking a little too much at the beginning. That can be an issue. But it's considered, I mean, in the world of like trainers and even researchers in strength and conditioning, it's pretty much considered like the number one supplement that's really beneficial, virtually zero side effects or risk if you take it the way that you're supposed to take it. And it can be very helpful. There's a lot of research that shows that it's just going to be helpful. It's not going to change your whole body and change everything that you do, but it's something that can be helpful. So that's something for people to look into. Again, I check with your doctor too to see if you have any issues that might conflict with that. But general creatine monohydrate, there's all these different formulations out there that are really expensive, and they try to argue that they're better absorbed and all the stuff, but just the standard stuff is good. That's what all the research has been done on, just creatine monohydrate. Probiotics, that's another one that got pretty hot for a while there. Everybody thought that was the key to everything, and that one also is cooling off quite a bit. It's just, I think they're realizing that the gut microbiome, not that it's not important, it's just way more complex than most people realized from the beginning. And so trying to take a probiotic, it can be helpful. It's not to say you shouldn't take it at all. Some people take it if they're like also on antibiotics for being sick. Some people take it like if they're traveling and if they have stomach issues. So if you find them helpful, then go for it. But it's one of those like they're realizing like, well, there's so many different strains. I mean, all different kinds of bacteria, and like trying to figure out what you need individually and what the best one is and what's going to be helpful is pretty hard and can't really figure it out right now in our current state of research. So if you find it helpful, go for it. It's not necessarily going to be detrimental, but yeah, probiotics are kind of a maybe. Yeah, I think those are kind of the main ones that I like to talk about. There are obviously a lot of other supplements out there. There are some that have some decent research behind them. There's a lot of BS out there too. The website examine.com is a really good resource if there's something that you're curious about, and they go through all the research. They're a very well respected website as far as researching supplements. Let's see, how much more? Okay, we'll talk a little more back to the protein topic. Protein for vegans and vegetarians. And this is, I mean, anybody, this applies to anybody because even people who eat animal products aren't necessarily only getting their protein through animal products. They're also going to be getting it through plant-based sources as well. So some decent sources, like some vegan sources would be like soy products like tofu and edamame, different types of lentils, all different types of beans, split peas, black-eyed peas, nuts and seeds like chia seeds, flax seeds, pumpkin seeds, hemp, and then protein powders. They've got like pea and hemp and soy and brown rice and other kinds. Those can be sources of protein for vegans. Vegetarians, cottage cheese, Greek yogurt, things like that. Dairy, if you do okay with dairy. Eggs and egg whites, and then there's other protein powders. You know, maybe you can go with like whey or casein or an egg-based protein powder. So those are good options for those. And I like vegans and vegetarians need to know that you really need to focus even more, I would say, on getting enough protein. And it typically you probably need even more than somebody who eats animal-based products because you're not getting as high of quality of protein. And so it's even more important to get into that range. And I think you really need to work to try to get to the bottom end of that range, at least into that part of the range, because yeah, your body just it's just harder to get. You just don't have all of the amino acids in the same proportions as you would get with animal products. So that's just something that you need to pay attention to for vegans and vegetarians. And we have a lot. I mean, there's a lot of people, and it's a pretty common thing nowadays. So just understanding that and making sure that you might have to rely a little bit more on protein powder for a little while, as you kind of figure out how to get that in. But working with a lot of vegans and vegetarians over the years, that is definitely like the number one thing that they need to think about, and it's usually the biggest challenge. And so being strategic about it definitely can make a difference and be helpful there. This question, I work out in the evening and I don't feel hungry after that. Is it okay to skip dinner and not have anything till the next morning? I would say no, that's probably not a good idea. I mean, you're not going to get sick and die from that, but you are, again, you're doing your workout, you're creating a lot of this muscle damage, and your body is craving nutrients to help kind of rebuild and get ready for the next day. And by pushing that out another 8 or 10 or 12 hours or something, that's a long time. Unless I would say that if you're having a big meal with a lot of protein and like a big complete meal, like maybe an hour beforehand, hour and a half beforehand, that's at least going to put you in a better position than if you are like waiting 3 hours and then doing your workout and then not eating for another 10 or 12 hours. Yeah, I think you just need to get, because when you have that meal beforehand, let's say an hour, hour and a half beforehand, those like the nutrients, the amino acids and stuff stay in your blood for several hours afterwards. So that's going to be helpful. But I would say that that's not an optimal way to go about it, even if it's just having a shake or something afterwards. And if that's all you can have, just some liquids, that would be better than not doing anything. And then going back to the essential amino acids that I talked about earlier, I didn't talk about with the supplements a few minutes ago. This could be a situation where maybe doing some essential amino acids could be helpful too, just because again, you're trying to get something into your system for recovery. And so if afterwards, if that's all you can have, a protein shake or some amino acids or something like that, that's what I would do. But I would try to fit something in after the workout if you're doing the evening workout. If it's not a huge meal, that's fine, but something is going to be better than nothing in that situation. How do I create a caloric deficit to lose weight without compromising on essential nutrients each day? I think that is kind of the that is what everybody's trying to figure out, is not having too many calories, but still being able to get all the nutrients in that you want. And I think you need to just think about nutrient density. So lots of foods that are nutrient dense, like vegetables and fruit, protein. If you're doing meat or plant-based, you're going to get a lot of nutrients from those. Um, and think about things with fewer calories. If you're just doing um, if you're just doing a bunch of like bread and pasta and everything, you don't get a ton of nutrients. You get a lot of carbs from those things, but there's not a lot of vitamins and minerals and micronutrients and stuff, but it comes with a lot of calories. And so if a lot of your food is that kind of stuff, this is not to say you can't have any of it. It just means if that's the majority of your food, then you're just, in order to get the nutrients you need, you just need to keep eating more food. And then you get to a point where you're just way over on calories. And so think about that nutrient density. Fruits, vegetables, things that have a lot of fiber in it, like whole grains, stuff like that, are going to be really helpful. Another thing with that one, another topic, avoiding empty calories like liquid calories. If you are, let's say you're tracking your food and every day you're having and let's say you're trying to get 2,000 calories a day, and every day you're having a 500 calorie Starbucks drink, that's going to provide almost no nutrients. It's pretty much all going to be sugar and fat, and you're getting no micronutrients out of that. And now you're 500 calories into your 2,000 calories. And so you only have 75% of your calories left for the day, and you need to get all those other nutrients in. So then it becomes really important to be super nutrient dense on the rest of it. So think about kind of those wasted calories, those empty ones, and liquid calories are oftentimes, and I don't mean like protein shake liquid calories. I mean like soft drinks and juices and things like that, where it's pretty much just going to be sugar and carbs and not really anything else. Processed foods, also those are like super concentrated with calories, but without a lot of nutrients. So a lot of like prepackaged foods, things like that, are going to be, and like ultra processed foods are going to be pretty low nutrient density. Simple carbs. So again, we talked about like bread, pasta, rice. Again, nothing wrong with having any of those things. It's more of just like making sure that those don't make up the majority of your calories during the day. Like those are kind of like filler, but then you have more nutrient dense food with that. All right, getting towards the end here. Thanks for sticking it out so far. Are nuts like almonds, walnuts, and pistachios a good source of protein? Should I consume them every day? Those, they do have some protein in them, and but I wouldn't eat them strictly for that reason, because if you're trying to eat enough nuts to get a lot of protein, you're gonna probably overdo it, and they are more of a fat-based food because the majority of the calories in those come from fat. Again, healthy fat for most of them, but if you try to eat a lot to get a lot of protein, you're also going really high on fat, and so you just have to be careful and kind of take that into consideration when you're looking at your whole picture of your macronutrients during the day. Is it are you going way too high on your fat because you're trying to get a lot of servings of nuts during the day? But there's a ton of benefit. I mean, there's heart benefits to it. There's some fiber in them. They're definitely good, but not overdoing it. And I think that's the same with most like really fat-based foods. Eggs and high-fat dairy like cheese and things like that, is they can be healthy, but just be careful not to go overboard on them. So yeah, to answer the questions, yes, they're healthy. They're not a great source of protein, but they are a source of protein. And just don't go overboard with them when you are having kind of pre-measure out how many you're going to have, rather than just like dig into a bag or a container of them and just go indefinitely. This one, tips to improve metabolism after the age of 40. So I think this is going to be kind of the general rules for most people, even under 40, is strength train. So that's going to help you keep a good amount of muscle mass, a healthy amount of muscle mass that keeps your metabolism at a better level. Because naturally, after our late 20s, 30, we start to naturally lose muscle mass each year unless you are proactively fighting that. And the way you fight that is you strength train and you eat enough protein. And so if you're not doing either of those things, you're going to go downhill with your muscle mass over time. And when you go downhill with your muscle mass, you're also slowing down your metabolism with that too, because more muscle mass usually means faster resting metabolism. So strength training, regular activity, as you get older, if you're becoming more and more sedentary, that also means your daily calorie expenditure is going to be lower. And so you're going to have this slower metabolism, but it's more that you're just not doing as much, not moving around as much. So think about maybe measuring your steps, keeping track of your steps, and shooting for that, 8 to 10,000 steps a day is going to be helpful. So that's a way to kind of measure your general activity. protein intake. We talked about try to get into that healthy range. That's going to be helpful to keep your metabolism in a better place because it's going to help you maintain your muscle mass. Sleep. Sleep is a big issue. I mean, that can potentially be a more impactful thing to focus on than workouts or nutrition. If your sleep is awful, then it's really hard to out workout and out train and out nutrition your way into good health if you have really crappy sleep. So at least try to get a baseline of 6 to 7 hours at a minimum. Think about trying to get good quality sleep, but that can be helpful for keeping a healthy metabolism too. And then managing stress. Make sure you're taking breaks sometimes, do some meditation, yoga, breathing, stretching, foam rolling, things like that. Just walking, hiking, like gentle hiking and gentle bike rides and things like that can be helpful to manage stress. But that's another really big topic too. All right, I think with this last one, what's the best food to start the day for someone who does not eat eggs and is a vegetarian? So there's not necessarily like a right food to have. Water, definitely good. We talked a little bit about if you're trying intermittent fasting, then maybe you don't need to have something right away, but you would want that first meal, whenever it is, to be higher in protein. Greek yogurt is a really good option. A lot of people do great with that because it's very protein dense. Being careful not to get the ultra sweetened kind or adding a bunch of extra sweeteners to that. Because it can become a very carb heavy meal too if you're not careful. So Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, soy, as we talked about, other kind of vegan and vegetarian sources of protein. This is an opportunity where protein shake, maybe in the morning, a smoothie or a shake is a good way to do it. It's not going to take a lot of time to prepare. You can kind of take it with you if you're commuting or have it with you while you start working. So shakes can be a good option at this point of the day too. And then there's plant-based breakfast meats. Now be careful, some of those plant-based meats are pretty just a bunch of processed garbage in them. But there's some out there where they're gonna be higher in protein and they'll be plant-based. Like breakfast sausages and things like that you can give those things a try. The nice part is I mean, based on like what 10 or 20 years ago, the number of products that were out there. Now there's a lot of BS products too, but there's a lot of good things. I mean, walk through a Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, and Costco. Like go through there's a lot of options for like plant-based protein sources. Different types of like organic stuff that's like good options out there. And now they're usually a little bit more expensive, but they're reasonable enough nowadays where most of the things are somewhat comparable. So we're not short on options these days of trying to find healthier foods. It's maybe they're just blended in with a bunch of other junk food, but there's things out there if you walk through the aisles. I mean, just walking through a Whole Foods, you can find some things that can work and test things out. Buy some different pre-made protein sources like they can be plant-based or little burgers or fish patties or chicken burgers, turkey burgers, things like that. Try some of those things out and see if you like them, see if they taste okay. They're going to be easy sources when you're kind of stressed and you're busy, you get home from work and you're tempted to just get takeout or order some food. It's like there's a lot of those options in the frozen food section that you can prepare and take 10 minutes to prepare. It can give you a much better option than just ordering out there. So all right, that goes through all of the questions that I had. So yeah, feel free to ask more questions that come in. We can do more of these things too. But yeah, let me know if you have questions. Thanks for hanging in there this whole time.